Yeah, so if we're just looking at this language around Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people is the best. Indigenous, if you're going to use it, that's getting more common. Put a capital. However, some Aboriginal people object to that and say, well, Indigenous, you talk about animals and plants as being Indigenous, and we're being talked about as Indigenous, and it's just like we're a kind of a specimen of a animal or plant. So a number of words have issues and problems with some people, and it's hard to know who. So stick with the safest one. I've never heard anybody have a problem, and I've worked quite a lot with Aboriginal people. They've never had a problem with that word as far as I know, or that collocation. Just stick with that. Yeah, no, that's right, Min. Tribe. Why not tribe?
Tribe is Kurunga.
So is group, isn't it? A lot of people. Min, you did it. Any thoughts on?
Yeah, tribe usually it's kind of on the society. That means really on the society who being very non-civilization.
Not civilized. That's right.
People.
Yeah, exactly. It has the connotation of uncivilized. It's a colonialist kind of word. The tribes, we come in and civilise them. And it's got that colonialist sort of implication. It's interesting because I noticed the woman who was older, she used that word. And, when people use words, you can tell what level of political consciousness. Not everybody's the same in their consciousness. And, she was using that word and I felt,
When we can
some Aboriginal people will use it, and they're okay with it, but a lot are not. So, just there's don't use it. When do you use it? It's really simple. Don't. Don't use it. African people in I don't know what you think of it, but certainly some Sudanese they use tribe a lot, and it doesn't seem to have that connotation there. They don't see the problem, but around the world often it's a problem.
I think maybe in Eritrean culture, because it's a bit similar to Sudanese, I think it's the same thing. I think they don't have a problem using it as a tribe, because it's like kind of like a clan,
Yeah.
How like different villages they have their own. How like in Aboriginal culture, like they have like different areas and known. For example, there's the Ghana people, and there's another area, different name.
Certainly those groups exist. It's a question of which word to use in English.
I think when Sudanese and Eritreans, when they use it as tribe, they use it as referral as like a clan or like a clan or something like that.
And for them it doesn't have this connotation.
It doesn't have
I've never heard you said tribe means uncivilized.
Right. It has that flavour to it. I'd say in England, America and here, it has this colonialist feel. It's a whole bunch of words that you just don't use anymore. Like I've mentioned already, half caste, quarter caste, octoroon, these were the levels. So if you're half European, half Aboriginal, you don't say that anymore. You're either Aboriginal or you're not. But in the old days, if you're a half caste, then another lot of European ancestry, quarter caste, then another one, octoroon, octo from 8, all those terms, they're like apartheid, just gone. Thank God.
What call those people have?
You don't say half, you don't say half blood, you don't say mixed race, it's just you're either Aboriginal, because of the definition, that your ancestry is Aboriginal, you identify as Aboriginal, and the community of Aboriginal people think of you as Aboriginal, then you're Aboriginal. Or you're not. There's no halfway, there's no quarter way, and if you start referring to those sorts of things, people can get very upset. Because all that stuff, all that categorisation belongs to that semi-apartheid or even fully apartheid kind of history of Australia. So, as you could see on the film.
Is that only for the Aboriginal culture, like, you know how you said that, like, let's say if they're like half European, half Aboriginal, like they wouldn't like to use that word, they would like to be identified as one category.
Yeah.
Is that only for the Aboriginal culture?
Somebody might say, look, I'm an Aboriginal person with Irish ancestry.
Yeah.
You know, let them describe themselves.
Ah,
And then
okay.
what, you know, it's just cultural sensitivity in any group, isn't it? Across groups. You just listen to what people say,
Mhm.
and then that's the terminology you're trying to use. Sometimes you don't get a chance to hear what they say, sure. So then just stick with the safe stuff.
Yeah.
You know, if you know they're identifying as Aboriginal, okay, they're an Aboriginal person. Yeah. But yeah, use that group. There was another word, for example. I'm not sure if I've got a double C. I think it's either double C or one C. This word has been gone from the language for so long I haven't seen it spelled. A pickaninny. The woman describing that, you know, when she took us up to the front of the gallery and there's the beautiful painting with the Aboriginal woman near the river, and she said, oh, there's a pickaninny. Now that's a word for an Aboriginal baby, but that is such a colonialist word. It belongs to sort of 1947 or 1953, and I was absolutely shocked that she used the word. She was a lovely person and everything, you know, and she knew a lot about the art, but her level of consciousness about Aboriginal culture was just about zero. To use a word like that, it was just, I was stunned. I haven't heard anybody use that word for like 30 years. And, you know, she was old and she's probably from a conservative culture. Probably had, those gallery guides are there because they're really interested in art. She knew a lot about art. She's not necessarily an expert in Aboriginal culture. She's brought in and trained up to talk about those paintings. But, you know, not a lot of depth of experience of Aboriginal issues, quite clearly. So, the point is, there's a range of consciousness, and with that range of consciousness, there's a range of language use, isn't there? It's like any of these historical racial issues. So, you know, you'll develop a sensitivity to it. Okay, I think we've covered everything there. From my point of view, yeah. Now, why is this a common error? In my opinion, that's right.
You're right, in my opinion.
And we've talked about this before, where we have two parallel collocations, they often mean the same thing, and the wires kind of get crossed. We have this saying in English, your wires get crossed, you get confused. So, and it often happens with prepositions. So it's from. Now why is it from and why is it in? We've got one more bit of grammar to do on conditionals, and then we're going to do stuff on prepositions. We can jump a little bit now. Prepositions are metaphorical, most of them. There's a metaphorical logic. If I'm looking here, this is my view of the room. This is my point of view. And from here, it looks like a big room. Okay? If I go and stand over here, and I'm looking across here, from here, it doesn't look so big, from this point of view. Now that's the physical, literal meaning, isn't it? Now all we're doing is making it a metaphor, you know, my point of view on the left, or my point of view on the right, or wherever, but it's like from this position. That's why we say from. Can you see how there's a metaphorical logic to that? Opinion is more like in my thinking, there's my thinking, it's like a field, and in it. Yeah. So then that preposition has a logical, metaphorical sense to it. This prepositions, they seem arbitrary. Arbitrary means like no reason, no rationality behind it. They just seem random, I'm sure, to you most of the time. And, you know, if you asked a native, they wouldn't be able to explain, why do I say that, why do I say this as a preposition? Okay, as kind of, you know, students of language, now we've got this concept of metaphor. If you apply it to prepositions and think about it for a little while, you often discover the metaphorical logic. And when we see sense in something, we remember it much better. We understand it. We remember things we understand. If we don't understand, it's pretty hard to remember it, isn't it? So, I think one of the key things about prepositions, not all of them, but 80 to 90% of them can be conquered, can be beaten by using the principle of metaphor. And you often have to think and meditate on it a bit and, you know, come up with a bit of creative idea. But you can often get the metaphor. Once you've cracked it, I think you'll find it easier to work with. not all of them, and it doesn't happen just once. You probably have to do it a few times with the same one, but it'll speed up the process. Aboriginal, capital, people, yep. Yeah, probably cross that off, because it's a dependent clause, but the dependent clause is coming after. Well, that's my mistake. Here's the other one. Very common. Stressed, yes. Because the situation is stressful, but the person is stressed. I hear this as people write it or say it, oh, it was very stressful on the weekend. No, you had a stressful weekend. The thing that was kind of attacking you was stressful. You were stressed. Because of, now this etc., yeah, very useful for notes, isn't it? But we never use it in writing. And yeah, just do that. Forget the etc., and you've got two things there, and you put an and. Because you've got two things, we don't use that. So when you have three things, you have the Oxford comma, which we've talked about before. Now, I'll just tackle the rest, and then I'll come to this first one, which is the more complex one. Transferred, yes, you need to double your R there. Transferred, referred, deferred, you put a double R, correct. And cannot is one word, that's right, Nick. Join it up. Don't write can not, it's always cannot, one word. Aboriginal people, yes, same problem there. Just repeating it a few times so it really kind of drills in and sticks. Now, we wouldn't solve it this way, because what we're talking about here is, I think the best way to do it is, think of all, so if I write this, most of, it's a very common area, most of and then all of something is wrong. Most of the subset is correct. So, perhaps demonstrate like this. Here's all of Aboriginal culture. Okay, so if we're talking about the whole lot, we just say most. And that's the same with anything. Most Germans are relatively wealthy compared to the rest of the world. But if we do a subset, most of the Germans who live in the south, however, are poorer than the rest of the country. Most of the Germans who live in the south, so there are, sorry, I've changed it now from Aboriginal culture to Germans. I just want to give you another example, then we'll come back to this. So, you've got all Germans, most Germans, no all. But when you're talking about a subset, most of the, and you remember our the, we've post-modified. Most of the Germans who live in the south, post-modification, particular group, unique, then you use your of. Okay, now in this case, the person's wanting to say, which one? Talking about this group, subgroup, subset, or talking about all of Aboriginal culture? All, right. So in that case, most Aboriginal culture, right?
If you was, the person was saying, most of Aboriginal culture who live in South Australia.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. Then you've got a subset. Yeah. Yeah, pretty common error, and yeah, maybe just people have been taught it. Is that clear, that one? And because you've got a subset, you're going to have a the. That's going to be a package. They'll always come together.
And culture is never doesn't get different.
You could. Most Aboriginal cultures, in fact, that's probably politically you're most correct, isn't it? Because many nations, it's there's no one Aboriginal culture. There are many, many countries, many, many cultures. So ideally, that would be your most culturally sensitive thing, an accurate thing to write. Yeah. Good eye. So those were the issues that I thought were kind of useful to talk about with everyone. How are you going with your individual corrections? You managed to...
Most Aboriginal cultures and arts.
Okay. Okay. Well, in this case, I see. Here, most Aboriginal if we did that, cultures and...
Arts.
No, we can't, because it's uncountable. If we wanted to make it plural, we'd have to do that kind of an art practices, something like that. Artistic, we'd have to... Because we're making this sort of... If we want to pluralise it, you can't have arts. When you say arts, what that refers to are all the different subjects. When you talk about the arts, you talk about music, literature, visual art, etc.
But the person is talking just about the painting, or what?
Well, here, you're talking about the different cultures around the country, and therefore you pluralise this too, the different artistic practices around the country. Yeah. Cannot be transferred. If you wanted to write it like that, you could. Yeah. How are you going on your individual things? Did you fairly confident about your corrections? Because if there's anything you're not sure of, see me at some point, probably today or tomorrow, just to check your accuracy. Okay. All right. If we've covered that, I hope that was an interesting exercise for you. Interesting experience, I think, going there and seeing that stuff. The other thing that was partly the object of this exercise was this idea of sort of pushing your English to the point where it kind of breaks, isn't it? And you have to use native language and then try to translate that if you can, and then write it into your English. How many of you found you were doing that? Did you? Because I couldn't tell from the final product. I meant to ask you actually to underline the points that you felt you couldn't say in English, but then you figured out finally, because obviously I can't tell from the product. How many of you found yourself noting, at least, in native language some of the time? Yeah? Did everyone find you were kind of stretching the boundaries and had to go back to the native language?
Yeah, I had one sentence.
Yeah.
I thought I changed it from my language to English, and I thought it's wrong, but it's right.
You managed to get it right, yeah. And that's another exercise. It's a growth exercise, isn't it, to try that translation. And, risky business, but that's where the growth comes in. Yeah, as I said before, it's like if you push 30 kilos, it's like just stretching and pushing 40 or more, and that's where the growth comes. So that as an exercise, I think you can reproduce pretty much anywhere. You can go anywhere at all. You can go into the atrium here and just try to describe something about that or how you feel. You can sit at the bus stop and just look at a person going past, and try to describe them really carefully, their facial features. I bet there are lots of words about, appearance or personality that, you would run out of English. So, okay, you find 3 or 4 words, translate them, try to build them into little descriptions. Do hundreds of these and throw them in a folder under your bed, Do it for a few years. That will have a huge effect on your vocabulary, the growth of the language into quite particular and accurate areas. It's probably one of the best things you can do. Just as a very regular thing, a couple of times a week or more. Obviously, if you did it every day, you'd move 7 times faster than if you did it once a week. It's up to you. But I hope you can see the point of the strategy. Yeah. And no doubt, when you try those tricky areas, the English might be grammatically a bit wobbly and there'll be a few mistakes, that's okay. keep reading, keep listening, and you'll hear that structure that you tried. 3 weeks later, oh, yeah, I got it right, you know. Or no, oh, I need that preposition there, or whatever. You know? It's that input-output, obviously, with consciousness, not just doing it, but deliberate practice that's going to develop you, isn't it? 10,000 hours, guys.
With generations, generation can get S or not?
Yes, you could, absolutely, yeah. They would just have a different meaning, probably a good meaning actually, good point. Not just to the next generation, but future ones as well. Sure, you could. Alright, so I hope that was useful as an exercise on strategy and using real life, you know, as the source of writing and language.